You know, every time a journal comes out, I always say it's the best one. And I do feel that way.
The fruit of your labor.
Yeah, the fruit of our labor. But the reason I say that is because I do feel like we're advancing somehow each time, adding a little bit more of ourselves, rethinking about how we do things. And I like that, and I enjoy it.
Hi Rima.
Hi Lynn.
Thanks for having us today in your office at AUB.
Hello, Sahla.
So you teach creative writing here at the university. Mm-hmm. Do you teach any other courses at the moment?
I'm teaching Introduction to Creative Writing and Creative Nonfiction.
So how did you get into teaching?
Oh, well, that was about 20 years ago exactly. I just wanted to. That was what I wanted to do. I mean, I wanted to write, I wanted to read, and I wanted to write and read. Okay, and I love writing, obviously. So I thought, and teaching always inspired me, and I felt like I wanted to do something that was meaningful, that somehow, had me interacting with youth. And so I started out quite young, and I think the first 2 years of teaching were like the hardest thing I've ever done in terms of like the amount of work that you have to put in, and the whatchamacallem, these landmark like moments, like you have so many moments where you screw up, and so you have to like face that shame and humiliation to yourself, and or like the difficulties of teaching anyway.
But you've come a really long way.
Have I?
Yeah, teaching for 20 years, that's quite a milestone actually, I'd say.
Yeah, and still looking this young too.
So for our viewers who don't know you, aside from being a teacher and a writer, you're also the editor of Rusted Radishes. Can you give us a brief introduction into what Rusted Radishes is and what you publish?
Sure. So Rusted Radishes had its debut in 2012. It started off as a student magazine, but we always knew that it was kind of grown from the students in a way that we saw so much talent through our students. But we also wanted to publish more established writers as well, and artists. So it evolved over the years to become what it is today, which is bilingual. And so we have an Arabic section and an English section. The editor of the Arabic section is Zaina Halabi. And we also have an art editor, who's Omar Masmar. We have a graphic narratives editor, Lina Ghaibi. And Amelia Ayash, our drama editor. And we also have someone new who joined us this year, Maha Ahmad, as a poet. So we kind of have this sort of a very, and we were lucky enough to have May Ghaibi to join us as the art director. So after Ahmad Gharbi was with us for many years. So it's a very nice, strong team, and it's gained a lot of, I guess, cred. Finally, after all of this hard work, it's been 10 years. And so we publish artists and writers from the region and diaspora and anyone connected somehow to here.
Yeah, you publish by theme. So you launch submissions per theme. I can see that your last issue was about money, but your most recent issue, which you've just opened submissions for, is under the theme of labor and idleness.
Yeah.
So what can you tell me about this theme? Why did you decide to choose this topic, and what kind of pieces are you looking for?
So it was labor and idleness, just like all of our themes, they're kind of the moment, sort of just a kind of, I have to admit, there's sometimes just a feeling about the theme, or a desire for certain discussions. But also this particular one, labor and idleness, is of the moment, but it's also of the work of Rima Majid, who works on labor and critical studies and political economy. And she wanted to do a labor issue with us, and it fit, yeah, and it was something that we didn't have to spend too much time thinking about. I mean, in terms of saying yes, because it's, it's part of our everyday thinking now, especially since Corona, but also, Corona in here.
Economic collapse, deterioration.
Yeah, so I guess it kind of works well, like kind of jumping off of money.
Yeah, I feel like they really complement each other in a way.
They do, but money was, money, of course, we could have written about labor and solicited on that. And there is a piece or two about, regarding labor, but we were thinking about it in different terms. Labor is just now kind of like we added the idleness to it because it's, I guess, since the seismic shift, if you want to call it, of our recent times, the idleness, we were allowed to be idle. We allowed ourselves to be idle. We've become actually a little bit more idle. And so we kind of want to explore that dichotomy. And we've gotten some good submissions so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
When's the issue set to be released?
Well, probably next fall.
Okay.
It was set to be released in April, but some things have changed. So probably next year at this time.
Okay. So you mentioned that you've been with the journal for quite some time. It's been 10 years for the journal itself. What can you tell me about this journey? How could you describe the growth of Rusted Radishes over the years? Well,
what I'm most proud of today is that it's bilingual, and the fact that we are publishing in Arabic, and we're publishing work that is, contemporary, it's on the edge, it's beyond, not beyond, but just it's important. I felt like that was kind of like the only way it could go. I felt like it was the moment for it. 3 or 4 years ago when Anaisa joined us, she's the one that started the Arabic section, and it felt like, okay, that was the right transition.
Okay. A few years back, if I'm not mistaken, you also launched the website for Rusted Radishes.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, so what's the difference between the print edition and the website?
Yeah, the webzine, actually, that was a pivotal point. We've spoken about this before, about, print versus digital. The print version, I feel, is essential. A lot of people say, do away with it, you don't need it. I don't feel that way. I think that it's... somebody told me recently that they saw our first issue, which we don't have anymore to even sell. And at the time, we had printed 2,000 copies because we had this small grant. And so we're like, okay, let's print 2,000 copies. We were giving it away for free to students. So we're like, so we sent it all around, and we put it in coffee shops and bookshops and wherever you could find it. So now it kind of pops up in these funny places, like, and I like that. I like that it's like around, and 10 issues in, that the journal is in these different places. And I mean, the journal is very much about place, I mean, it's about space and place, and more so than geography, but with the web, it did something that made Rusted Radishes an everyday sort of, you could engage with it regularly, you didn't have to wait once a year for it anymore. It allowed us to kind of be part of the daily, so we did confine ourselves with themes in some way. We didn't, at first, when we first started, we would leave it open, and then we would discover what would come in, we'd see what would come in, and we'd say, okay, well, it looks like this is the theme, That happened for the first few issues. Then we're like, okay, let's just call for the theme. But now with the webzine, we could do series and collaborations. We have a really beautiful series coming up that's a collaboration with Megaphone that is called Shame. So kind of made people more aware of us throughout the world, and it brought in different new submissions, and it made us think differently about publishing as well.
Yeah, but I like that you kept on the print edition, especially after like so many magazines in recent years have had to close down or go out of print because they could no longer afford to pay those costs. I like that you kind of still insist on printing issues, because I feel like it's nice just to have them all stacked up in some place, like have a physical archive of the work. So you have quite a few issues next to you right now of recent themes. Can you tell us a bit more about these themes that you've covered?
One more thing about the print version that's important to know is that the students from the Department of Architecture and Design, they've been designing it since the beginning. And so they get to learn how to do this, and it's always like a really intense, I think ultimately gratifying experience for them. Our journal ends up being a very beautiful object, whereas, I mean, I think nowadays like literary journals have caught on to that, obviously, to design and art and how, you know, the aesthetics of a journal. But as I had always seen them before 10 years ago, it was like they were pretty boring, you know, like most of them don't have images, and they're black and white stuff. But in terms of the themes, like, I mean, I'll just take this for example, like health and illness, for example. Health and illness was one like that came basically, I wanted to see more stories about, you know, that talked about this subject. What was funny about it, and that kind of came from a personal experience too, and my own writing of thinking about, you know, a certain health issue that I had, and writing about it, and I thought, okay, well, but, you know, it's not like we have so much at our disposal to, you know, it's, because it's intimate, it's difficult to write about. So we got a lot of wonderful pieces that year, and especially because then the pandemic hit in the middle of the call. So that was like a very convenient
They're always
moment.
so well timed.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, my co-editors think I'm psychic, which is I take that as a very high compliment. Yeah. Let's see, sea change, for example, that came out of a wonderful discussion by the sea. We were sitting by the sea, the other editors, and, you know, was it the middle of Sauda? No, it was before Sauda. And then we predicted that too. So we're just like clairvoyant, you know.
You have a sense for these things.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying, like labor is of the moment. I mean, there's always a discussion that's bubbling around you, whether that's, you know, a discussion that is, you know, explicit or not. There's always just feels like there's something of the moment that you can grab, like put your finger on, but not necessarily, you know, have it all in your head. So like, what's everybody saying about this thing? Yeah. And we try not to choose themes that everybody's already spoken about, you know. But like crossing borders, for example, that was like when we started, when there was a lot of migration happening, you know, people crossing the seas from Syria through Turkey to Europe. So, you know, of course, that was like, you know, a topic that was well covered, but it was also, how do we want to talk about it and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I feel like you've very carefully crafted these timeless topics that if I like 10 years from now, if I come back and I read this, it feels like the snapshot of time of what was going on in the country at the moment. I'm not sure if I should ask this, but do you have a favorite theme?
A favorite one of these?
Yes.
You know, every time a journal comes out, I always say it's the best one. And I do feel that way.
The fruit of your labor.
Yeah, the fruit of our labor. But the reason I say that is because I do feel like we're advancing somehow each time, adding a little bit more of ourselves, rethinking about how we do things, and I like that, and I enjoy it. So, I mean, can I say Money is my favorite? Maybe not. I do think that we did stuff in it that was really good, in terms of like kind of also making it sort of dense, in a way that like there isn't so much work in here, so many writers and so many artists. There's like a lot of work, for example, by some certain artists and writers. I don't know. I think I better not say.
It's a very tough question.
I don't want any of my editors to get upset either. No, I really love all of them, honestly. They all have something special about them. Yeah.
Was there a piece that you read in one of these issues that really stuck with you?
It's hard to say, Lynn. But so you know what, the first one that popped in my head, I'll just say that one, was in Health and Illness. The one that popped in my head is The Blast by Evelyn Hitte.
Can you read the first paragraph maybe for us?
Yeah, sure. Okay. I was sitting with my family when the floor of our apartment rocked back and forth. The emergency physician in me had drilled this moment time and again since moving from Baltimore to Beirut 11 years ago to a city rebuilt on the ruins of many seismic tragedies. Before I could direct my daughters away from the windows, a loud rumble followed by a deafening explosion blasted through the glass panes, sparing only the one behind us. For a moment, we all stood frozen there in our living room, absorbing the damage scattered around us. Glass was everywhere. Pieces the shape of daggers lay across the floor, on the tables and countertops, covering every surface. And she goes on, but what this, I think that, there's an excerpt here that's a little bit, this kind of tells you a little bit more about what she was feeling. Was this moral injury as an emergency department head, where this mayhem entered the emergency room, and then you had to help everyone. And then when you're trying to help somebody, there's somebody else that comes in, and then a friend comes in and a chandelier fell on her head and she couldn't help her. She forgot about her because there was something else. I mean, she's the head of the emergency department. So I'm not saying that this one's like better than all the other pieces. It pops in my head because also I worked on it with her, she felt it was hard for her to write it, so it was hard for her to write about the moral injury and really get in there, I always get like a little choked up at the last sentence, but I'm not going to read it to you because then it'll be a spoiler.
We can access it through the journal and online, I think.
Yes, yeah, it is online, so yeah. But I'll just read this other excerpt that kind of tells you a little bit more about what she was thinking. Crisis standards of care is a term thrown lightly across textbooks on mass casualty response, referencing an accepted and expected deviation from routine practice standards when resources become strained. Little, however, is mentioned of the burden of imperfect decisions with inevitable outcome implications on the physicians who have to make them. The weight of deciding who gets the last ventilator and who is left to struggle through without the protection of a secure airway. The guilt that comes with deciding who gets the last bed and who goes home, tendons severed, arms limp, to return for delayed care. The sickening feeling of betrayed trust that wells up with deciding who gets to line up for the CT queue and who is told to go home to wait it out. What if she has a brain bleed? Would it leave her with deficits? Would she forgive me? Would her family forgive me? The tormenting guilt, self-doubt, and disorienting moral injury that knowingly linger when all else has passed.
I'm feeling very emotional.
I know, yeah, it's really intense.
Yeah, it's a bit heavy, but it's so beautifully written as well.
Yeah.
Is there an issue that you think you would redo now looking back at it?
Yeah, definitely the first three. Yeah, I mean the first three, like the first one. You know what? I wouldn't redo it because it's nice to look back and see the growth, but also like the rawness of like how we did it and like how we put it together. It's fun. I like that question because it's like when I'm thinking back at it. There was Masan Hala Alian was published in that first one, okay, and she was like not very well known, and she was still young, and she had just graduated from Michael Dennison's poetry class, and so she wrote this beautiful poetry, and we're like, hey, that's a great poem, put it in. It's not like we thought about who she is, and it's just like you get to look back and say, okay, actually we were publishing good work then too, and we never like kind of I think that we stayed on our mission, that we want to bring up the, kind of highlight youth voices, and then also, our emerging writers and artists, as well as next to established writers and artists. So that process started from the beginning. It continues, and I don't think I'd change any of it, just because it's good to see where we were at.
Yeah.
But there's some things that, like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe if I read all my editorials again, maybe I'd be like, okay, this could have been better. I don't know.
It's okay. That's what you thought at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all of the moment.
Yeah. So we mentioned at the beginning that you're also a writer. What topics do you cover in your writing?
I don't necessarily need to stick to one topic, but I do write a lot about place. I do write a lot about Beirut, but kind of as I'm trying to think of how to encapsulate this, but not in a romanticized notion. It's just happens that Beirut there's a lot to write about, but also kind of being a transplant of some sort, and thinking about kind of being from two places. But that's not really, I don't know what I write about. Because it changes,
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm trying to get back to the collection of essays that I have, and the essays are partly about Beirut, but partly about motherhood, and partly about home, and partly about
So just
relationships, and there's all kinds of subjects that arise. I don't know what to say about what I write about, whatever's I'm obsessed with it.
Whatever comes to your head.
No, it's just there's things that, what do I want to figure out? But that's the bottom line. If there's something I really want to explore. And I also wrote many, 2 or 3 pieces about my health post-labor. So that's something that I really want to write more about, in kind of connection with the city and connection with geography and politics. So these things, that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. Yeah. So at the moment you're working on this collection of essays?
Yeah, well, I'm going on a residency in May.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, and that's when I will figure out what that book will be about. Okay. I'm hoping that will finally come, because as time goes by, when you're writing nonfiction, it's okay, do I still want to work on this? Some things become old in your head. There's some things that I wrote, in 2016. I'm I'm not gonna be able to write about that anymore. It was of the moment.
Absolutely.
Come in.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, you're a writer, so
Yes, I am. There are some things that I've written that I think I would definitely not be able to write again right now, just given the fact that it was a thing that came out in the moment at that time.
Yeah.
And it's always a changing process.
Well, yeah, and your style changes, your voice changes, and that's a really fun, exciting process come in. But I don't want to also I want to feel good about whatever I put out there. I want it to be something that represents me, and maybe it'll represent some writing that I did. I just published something recently, and it was something that I wrote in 2017. So it didn't really sound like me. What I think is me today, but it does sound, and it's just but I wouldn't have written that today.
It's you in a time.
Yeah.
It's you then.
But it's funny because the gap between publishing and writing can be very big.
Yeah.
And so there's that whole thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm coming down to my last question.
Okay.
What are you reading at the moment?
You know how I love this question. I'm reading a book called The White City. It is by Kevin Powers. It's I went to Ireland in March, and I got 2 books from there, and this is the second one, and I'm almost done with it. It's about somebody whose dad is, a very wealthy man who's about to, who's in trouble with the law, and so he gets cut off, and he has to find a way to, live his life without being the rich kid. And he's an English, literature PhD student, but then just goes on like a total drug bend throughout the whole book.
That's a very intense thing.
Yeah, so the whole book is him getting completely trashed, like beyond, and it's very specific about like how he gets trashed, and it's gruesome, and you live it with him, and then in the end there's a sort of awakening of sorts, which a reckoning that he has to find out the hard way through other people, seeing his destruction and having to tell him you're destroying yourself, he couldn't figure it out on his own.
Okay.
I mean, he knew it but couldn't face it, I guess.
That's very intense.
Yeah, you come to me for all kinds of intense subjects.
It's not a light read.
No, it's not. I can't wait to be done with it. I mean, I don't like light reads, honestly. I like but I also, I didn't love this book, so it's kind of slow. But I mean, I do. I like where it came to. Every book has something, that can live through with them.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you so much for having us today. This was very, very good.
To you.
And I'm so excited to see what the new issue comes up with.
And yeah, please, if anybody wants to submit, they can go to our website, find out all of the guidelines, and please do. The deadline's on the 31st.